This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order at 7:05. We need to seat alternates. I think, let's see, we'll have John Kopak seated for Jesse. And who else do we have for an alternate?
Me, Butch Simpson.
Butch. Yeah, Butch, you're gonna sit for Judy.
Oh, okay.
The third item on the agenda is communications. I have none. The fourth item on the agenda is approved meeting minutes from Tuesday, March 12th, 2020. I need somebody to make a motion and a second.
So moved.
Carl Foster, so move.
So Angie, were you first?
Maybe.
Okay. Angie first, Carl second. Any discussion?
Yeah. Do I vote the Butch?
Yes, but you're seated. Let me just see who is there.
Because I'm not. I wasn't a member of the meeting. I was there though.
Yeah, you were there. So yes, I think the only one who has to abstain is Garth. So no more discussion, correct?
I'm going to end up abstaining because I have corrections that are minor. It's not really pertinent to the minutes. It's just whatever. But I don't have it in front of me and I can't get it in front of me. So.
Okay.
We don't have to approve them tonight.
I don't think we have to. I don't think we have to wait. John, do we need to wait?
No. No, you don't need to wait for me. No.
Okay. Approved minutes of special meeting Thursday, March 12th, 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
One.
And that's just Garth, right? And John?
No, John. Yep.
All right, good. Hear from public.
Just hi and thanks for doing this.
Tell your name.
Oh, sorry, Paul Varga. And
Very good. Thanks, Paul. New business. Town fiscal year 18-19 audit presentation by King and Associates. We have Chris King and Sean O'Grady with us today, and we're going to hand it over to them to present their findings, and I think we'll follow with whatever questions we may have for clarifications from them.
Chuck, Angie DeSanto, point of order. I just saw Jesse join us.
Oh, excellent.
So now he has to be seated for himself.
Yes. I just joined, but I'm not sure how long I'll be able to stay on for. So maybe just keep everyone seated for the time being, unless maybe a vote comes soon and maybe change.
Jesse, what's your feeling? How much time do you have, do you think?
I'm guessing maybe a half hour, 45 minutes.
Is everybody comfortable with me leaving John Kopek seated for Jesse?
Yes.
Yeah,
Fine by me.
All right.
Yeah,
I think we'll leave it
it's all right with Butch.
as is. So I'm going to hand the screen over to Chris and Sean. Thank you.
Okay, hi, this is Chris King. Thank you. I don't know if it'll work. Can we share Sean's screen? Is that possible?
Yep. Give me 1 second.
All right.
You want the audit report first?
Well, what does everybody have? Do you have the audit report, hard copy?
Yeah, you sent us a 6-page synopsis.
Yep.
I do not have the 60-page whatever report. I have it obviously digitally. I have the single state audit, and I also have the management report. So I guess what I was thinking you might do is start with your, I believe that Cheryl Baker forwarded to Mike your 6-page synopsis. So I don't know if you want to go through the 6-page synopsis first, and then maybe delve into questions from there.
In a normal situation, we would have the 6-pager, and then you could flip through it and have your audit at the same time. But I guess, yeah, if we'll throw up the synopsis, maybe I'll walk through that, which basically references directly to the audit report. So I don't know if Mike has that. I guess Mike could throw it up. I know Sean has it too.
Yep, I just passed the screen over to Sean, so we should all be seeing his screen now.
Everybody see it?
I see it.
Yes.
Angie.
Okay. All right, so it's distilling the whole audit down into just a few pages. So this was our first year doing the audit for Ashford. In general, there financially wise, there's not much exciting, which I think is good. You don't want to hear things from the auditor about your finances, but we'll talk about the process that we went through. But first, the numbers. And so these page numbers reference to that large 60-page audit report, which is the basic financials audit of the town. So on page 12, you'd see general fund balance. And keep in mind, the audit report is laid out that the deeper you go into it, the more detail you see. So on page 12, total general fund balance, 2.08 million. And then on pages 31 and 56 is where you'd see charts breaking that down into the various components and restrictions that you might have, designations that you've made. Also on page 12, which is the fund financial statements, you've got your capital non-recurring fund, your standard budgeted transfer in from the general fund, 363. Which actually I think that was an additional appropriation that you made. You'll see that on there, and then also transferred in to capital non-recurring was 4,000 from the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund. The non-lapsing fund is the fund where if the Board of Ed has a surplus at the end of the year, a certain amount of that can go into the non-lapsing, and then it can be used in future years for certain purposes, as opposed to it just falling back into the general fund balance. That's a relatively new fund that was allowed by statute probably in the last 4 or 5 years. In the capital, non-recurring fund, you'll also see $30,760. So that's the money that you're getting from Eversource that's subsidizing the equipment lease. I think it's a lawnmower, if I remember right.
Yep.
That you're using. And so again, there's not a whole lot of highlights, which is good. Page 56 and 57, which is deep into the statement, you have actually a bunch of kind of sub funds in the general fund, and those pages on 56 and 57 show the breakout of that. The only ones that really have any substantial activity are the library fund, and that gets an annual appropriation from the general fund. There's again the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund, which has the money, any leftover money from the budget transferred into it. And then you'd also see that $4,000 coming out. I was just going to look at some of the other ones. The other components of that fund that don't have much activity, Knowlton Hall Fund, the 300th anniversary fund, you have a little bit of money left in town aid road grants. So those are all kind of subcomponents of the general fund that are listed on those pages. Then we get into the notes. So after the financial statements, there's a series of notes. Again, it gives more detail. On page 28, you would see additions and disposals, and they were mostly vehicles, the van and a truck and a school bus, and then there's subtraction for some of the older school buses, because in your town you own the buses, which we don't actually see that often. But so you own your buses, you can see them coming on and off of the fixed asset listing. The debt section, there really wasn't anything unusual there, except for you have your normal pay downs, scheduled pay downs of bonds and leases. The OPEB, that is other post-employment benefits, and that's related to the Board of Ed. They have a plan for retirees related to health insurance, and the balance, the liability of that plan actually went down. I believe, and so we looked into that further. I believe that there may have been the wrong number of participants reported or something in a couple years ago, because the liability dropped in half. But we looked at the census data that was used to calculate these numbers, and the number that's in there now does look reasonable. So page 53 and 55, people like to look at the teachers' retirement plans, which the state is funding 100% of. And every now and then they discuss maybe shifting some of that liability onto the towns. So you can see the teacher's pension liability. So that's the calculated actuarial liability over the assets in the plan. For the town of Ashford is $10 million. And then they also have an OPEB, retiree health insurance plan, and the liability on that is $2 million. As it says, you're currently responsible for none. Might be interesting if that comes up again in the next cycle after what's probably going to be a pretty abysmal fiscal year for the state. Your taxes receivable is, we always look at a percentage as part of our testing. It's 4.5% of your current levy is the outstanding taxes. We usually look for, Sean, what is our range that we're usually looking for?
2 to 6, around 4 is average.
Yeah, so 2 to 6. We sometimes we'll see a town with 8 or 10%, and we'll just dig a little deeper on that. So you're at 4.5. You're within our normal range that we see. I guess I can have you change the page instead of me flipping pages. GASB 84, until last month, there was a new standard that was going to be implemented, and it has to do with your fiduciary funds, which are the funds where you're basically holding people for holding money for other people. And a good example of those are the student activity funds at the school. You're collecting funds from the students for trips, for yearbooks, things like that. They're not really assets of the town. There's going to be a revision of those. So next year is going to be required. Now it's not. Everything's being pushed out. And what, as it says in this bottom bullet, what normally happens is your student activity funds now become called custodial funds, and your building permit or building bond funds that you're holding for contractors, which used to be out in these agency funds, are now rolled into the general fund. But they don't add to your fund balance because the cash balances of these bonds that are posted are offset with a liability back to the contractors. So it could increase your cash in the general fund, but also increase your liabilities, so have no impact on your fund balance.
Hey, Chris, this is Chuck Funk again. Could you explain that one more time, that last point? Somewhere in there, I lost track of what you were saying.
So there was a category called agency funds, and it was the money basically you're holding for other people. And they're going to be kind of broken out into a couple of buckets now. And the determining factor is administrative control. So for your building bonds, if someone posts a bond for a driveway or a road bond with the town, and you hold it until Public Works says, yes, the town meets the specifications, we'll take over the road. That's now going to be, that cash is going to be added to the general fund cash, but it will not falsely inflate your fund balance because it'll be offset with a liability that is due back to the contractor.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And the reason for that is why, from your perspective, why is Gatsby trying to make that clarification?
Well, I guess they're saying that if the town has any administrative control over the funds, like you do with a contractor, you're going to determine if that money is released or not, or if you're going to use it to fix the driveway apron, then it's really a governmental fund asset, and it's not really off the books, it's more on the books. Whereas the student activity funds, where a group says we're going to collect a bunch of money and go skiing, that's not going to be a government. The selectman's office is not going to determine how that money is spent.
Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's kind of a subtle change. So then we also have, as you mentioned, you have the smaller report, the state single audit, which you've had and you will continue to have unless the state cuts all your funding, which may happen. You never know now. And a management letter. And so in that state single audit package, there's a schedule that shows all your state money. Sometimes people look at it and say there's things missing, particularly on the education side. They'll say, oh, where's our Title I that we get from State Department of Ed? Well, those are actually federal sourced funds, so they don't go in this state single audit report. If you were to have a federal single audit because you had $750,000 of federal funds, which you don't, you'd see them listed there. But these are all state sourced funds are listed in this report. So it's just Town Aid Road, the pilot grants that are paid in lieu of your taxes, state-owned property, things like that. And it has our findings. So there are findings in the state single audit on page 1011, and then also in the management letter. So now we're going to get to the reason really that we're having this meeting in April and not December or so. When we came in to the town, this was our first year on the audit, what we found was when we started trying to accumulate data on the Board of Ed side, we weren't getting the information that we were asking for, and it really we weren't getting anywhere. So we met with Chuck, we talked to the first selectman, and then of course the first selectman was changing over at that time, talked to the new first selectman. and talked with superintendent and the business manager at the time. So long story short, between us and Karen Monroe, who I see is on the call, virtually every fund of the Board of Ed was revised, significantly after year end. We made most of the adjustments to the cafeteria fund, scholarship fund, and Karen did a tremendous amount of work over on the Board of Ed budget allocation and in the grants, as I mentioned, Title I, IDEA, those federal pass-through grants. We were at the point, we're trying to figure out what to do, and I kind of suggested that perhaps Karen throw in the towel. She didn't, and she somehow went through a lot of work and made it all work out. So with these substantial revisions, even though there was delays in getting the audit, the numbers actually came together. So that would not have been possible without a tremendous amount of work, more on Karen's side, and then there was some additional work on our side. So our findings, for the most part, and I'll get it out and read through it.
And is this from the management letter, or is this from the single state audit?
I'm still in the state single audit, page
right.
10.
Yep.
So we say that the Board of Ed accounting records were not reconciled on a timely basis, and so monthly and at year end, all their various funds had not been reconciled, and it was all that had to be done way after year end. And then we said that the areas included were the annual budget allocation, cafeteria fund, student activity fund, and the scholarship fund. So pretty much every account of the school, of the Board of Ed, had to be reworked after year end. So at year end, the Board of Ed accounting records did not reconcile to the town's general fund. There were adjustments that were needed to be made. The audit process was significantly delayed while these adjustments were being made to the records. I know you had transition of people. There were some problems with the software. I talked to the software company myself, which is unusual for us to get that deep into it. And our recommendation is really that these items get reviewed internally by the Board of Ed, reconciled over to the town side. I know for the cafeteria manager was running the ledger, and that wasn't being reviewed and reconciled by the business manager. So if the cafeteria manager is going to be doing the bookkeeping, which she probably shouldn't, it's got to be reviewed and monitored by someone else. And so on page 11, there are the responses and the corrective actions, which says going to work with the town treasurer for all journal entries, going to do quarterly. They're going to reconcile the Board of Ed with the town records. They're going to be reviewing student activity, cafeteria, and scholarship fund on a regular basis. And of course, you're moving to a new software. So never a seamless transition, even though they promise it. So that will be another challenge in the year that you're in now. The management letter so that was really the major concern and the major finding. The management letter is lower level findings. The first one refers to the fixed asset listings or your capital assets that are maintained in the selectman's office. That there's a listing in the selectman's office, but it was not being reviewed and updated. So going forward, the response of the town is that the town's finance office, in conjunction with the new software, will be bringing that listing into the new software, and then it'll be updated and maintained.
Chris, this is Chuck Funk again. When you're looking at management response in this letter to the Board of Finance, it's written very well. I'm fond of this particular letter. I think it spells everything out. But one of the questions I had was, when you are listing management response, is it actually management's response? So you guys had a discussion with management, and this was, or were these recommendations that you put forward that management should respond like?
Combination of both.
Is that Sean?
Yeah, so we have suggestions and then they get reviewed and updated by management.
Okay. So
for
anything that says management response has had some sort of response from some sort of management.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And then the next few findings, we talk about approval on invoices. They are over on the Board of Ed side. And these were sent over to Board of Ed so that they do the responses, or we draft them sometimes, but so Board of Ed has had their input on these responses. We want to get consistent approval on the invoices that are used for disbursements, because when we did our testing, some were approved, some weren't. So a control is only effective if it's applied consistently. And then we have a comment on timesheet approval at the Board of Ed. Sean, you want to talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, so we ran a payroll test over at the Board of Ed, and some of the hourly timesheets that we looked at, they didn't have signatures on them, so they weren't signed off on.
Yeah, you want your the person running payroll, everything needs to be approved. So that person is not making the decisions. The decisions are made by other people. The person that runs the ledger runs the ledger. And then the cafeteria, I kind of mentioned this earlier. Cafeteria manager is really doing everything. I maintain the QuickBooks, making deposits, buying all the product that's used. And so we don't think there's what's called an adequate separation of duties. And so this is where really the business manager needs to be interjected into that process, which was not happening during the year that we audited. So you can enter or incorporate separation of duties by making some of these roles the business managers, or at least having the business manager involved in reconciliation on a monthly basis.
So, Chris, this is Chuck Funk again. As fantastic as Karen has been, and we'd all love her to be able to stay. My understanding is she's not going to stay, but I don't know that for a fact. But my broader point is, if there's a change in business manager at any school, how do these duties that we're now defining differently than we did in the past, how do those get passed from one manager to the new manager? So in other words, who keeps track of the responsibilities of that particular position?
Well, there should be an accounting manual, and boards of education generally have lengthy policies and procedures for the boards as required by the state. And hopefully this could be part of the policies and procedures adopted by the board. So once you define the roles of the business manager and document them and approve them by the Board of Education, then they're there forever, no matter who the personnel are.
Okay, very, very good. So when you were talking, and I guess this is a question to Sean, were we getting some sort of response from, and we have Board of Ed members here, so we can certainly ask directly, but were we getting a response that these things were going to be added to some sort of responsibility list, or is that something? How do we know that this is going to happen, or we just have to keep testing, and that's why we have audits?
Yeah, so their plan was to review and update the policies and procedures, and I would assume that part of that would be documenting the new ones.
Excuse me,
Okay.
this is Carl Falsgraf. I served on a Board of Ed and was very involved with policies and procedures. And that Board of Ed will write these new policies, but isn't it then up to the superintendent to make sure that they're passed along to the proper areas?
Chris, do you have a thought on that?
Well, I think I would agree that the superintendent is the administrator. We sometimes get different opinions, different kind of styles of approach on boards of education as to who is going to be responsible for applying these procedures. I do think, like as Carl said, superintendent is the man or the person there that should be making sure that these adopted and drafted policies are in place. We don't want the superintendent to be a financial wizard. You know, we want the business manager to do that, but the superintendent has to be involved enough to make sure that these processes are in place.
Excuse me, this is Carl Falsgraf again. When I was on the board, it was our intention that we wrote the policies and procedures, and then it was our responsibility to hire the administrators to enact those policies and procedures. I mean, that was like our creed.
That sounds right to me because the administrators are there, you know, they're in the buildings. The final comment we had, also Board of Ed related, student activities funds. This is one of the funds that had not been reconciled throughout the year. What we found is that some of the groups or the little funds inside the fund, because they weren't being tracked, they were overspending and some are in deficit balances. And I don't think anybody knew that because the periodic reconciliations weren't being done. So there's some deficits that'll have to be covered somehow. So we provided adjustments to the funds over to Karen on these smaller funds that mostly Sean did. And then of course she did the adjustments in the big funds, the Board of Ed and the grants fund.
This is Chuck Funk again. John Lippert from the Board of Education. John, are any of these things that are being mentioned tonight, are these things that I'm sure you're cognizant of already? Are these being addressed with forensic accounting to help you guys organize some of this, or how are you handling some of this?
Hi, Chuck. This is John Lippert. The intent is, yes, for things like to be looked at by Steve Pedno. Exactly which items he has requested to take a look at, I don't know what all that entails. Should we ask for a better detail from Karen, or just leave it at yes, that's the kind of thing we're asking him to look at?
Okay. John, do you specifically have any questions or clarifications from King and King?
No, I don't. I thought that the comments and recommendations were very clear and much appreciated, to be honest.
Okay.
Over.
So yeah, I think that covers everything that I wanted to present. Like I said, financially, as far as the numbers go, you know, no big surprises. We didn't and then even on the school side, particularly, or at least in the budget, once Karen had gone through it, we did not then have large adjustments, which is good news. She took care of that. We did have to make adjustments in some of these smaller funds, cafeteria and activities.
Chris, this is Chuck Funk again. Chris, are you open to any sort of questions from board members at this point?
Sure, we can try.
Does anybody from the board have any specific questions at this point for Christopher or for Sean? And I know that some of you are getting this stuff, right in the moment, and we can always contact them for more clarification on any questions that you may have. But while we have them virtually live, if anybody has a question, I'd like you to ask.
I do. Angie
Who's
DeSanto.
speaking?
Angie DeSanto?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I took notes, but I didn't say what page. This was with the management response, and I think maybe Carl already asked it, but I'm not sure. And it says disbursements will have supporting documentation stamped, then dated and whatever by the responsible department/administrator. And I think the answer was the superintendent. That's the administrator.
I think the
School
discussion was the administrator is going to be responsible for making sure that these procedures are in place. Sometimes, though, the superintendent may not be the person that requested and just approve the disbursement. It might be say a pupil services director or someone else, initiates it through them. It might be their actual approval on the invoice.
Oh, okay. I just wrote a note. Who is this? So we're not sure, depending on their situation. How will they be held accountable before the next audit? And I guess we don't know.
I think the superintendent working with the business manager should hold everybody accountable, whether it's a purchase initiated by a superintendent or someone in custodial, but they should be sure that all of these purchases are approved by the appropriate department supervisor hopefully before the business manager has to process the check is what it really should be.
And is there any oversight by the Board of Finance in that situation?
Well, Board of Ed expenditures wouldn't be oversighted by Board of Finance.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think, if the business manager was having trouble getting department heads to approve documentation, the business manager should go to the superintendent to get that policy enforced.
Okay. Thank you.
Angie, is that all your questions at this
Yeah.
point? Okay, this is Chuck Funk again. Anybody else have any questions? Carl, Butch, anybody?
I just have
Butch,
a comment.
all set.
Go ahead, Carl.
I want to commend them for what I think is doing a fantastic job under very adverse circumstances, and coming in their first year and all the problems that were created not through their fault, and they did a fantastic job with this audit, and I want to thank them.
Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us. We're hoping that the second time around goes smoothly, and these recommendations should be designed to help the town protect itself. You don't want your auditor to come in and slap your hand. You want your auditor to be able to say, hey, let's tweak these procedures, because you are in a fiduciary role managing someone else's money. and keep everybody accountable.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody else have any questions while we have them on live? Okay, I'm gonna second Carl. I really want to hand it to the audit team, their patience and their both of you guys spent an awful lot of time listening and actually hearing what was of concern, and your patience and diligence and composure through the entire thing, I think was really, really fantastic. And I also want to thank you for helping the Board of Ed and the business office at the school that just did an amazing job trying to sort of rescue things, as you've already said. I think we as a town are all very, very appreciative of both, what you guys initiated by the approach of your audit, which exposed a lot of, I thought, weaknesses, and the ability of the school to respond ultimately, I think, was very strong. So we're all hoping that next year, as you have suggested, might go a little smoother.
I think Karen may have put more time into it even than we did.
There is no doubt in my mind that Karen is in this particular cycle been absolutely extraordinary. So we are all very, very thankful for her willingness to come out of retirement, God only knows why, and help us. Unless there's any other questions, I think we're all set with King and King for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we can leave now then?
Christopher and Sean, thank you very much, and I think we're all set.
Okay, thanks. Have a good night.
Do I need to transfer control back?
Yep,
Yeah.
give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Good night, Sean.
Mike, you're all set?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is to accept the audit report. We need to have a motion to accept the audit report, and that allows them to file it with the state. So that was sort of the reason for this meeting, was to make sure that we got that accomplished tonight. So I need somebody to make a motion to accept the audit report as it was presented.
Carl Falsgraf, so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second Angie DeSanto.
Do we have any other discussion?
Yes, it's Carl Falsgraf. I think this pertains to the audit. I think this audit shows that the school should strongly consider terminating their superintendent. And this has nothing to do with voting on the audit, but that this audit has shown that there was a total lack of leadership at that school. A lot of these problems were brought to his attention early on in the last fiscal year, and he just totally ignored all the warning signs.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Carl.
Butch Simpson. I'll second what Kyle just said, because I think some of that stuff has been going on for years. Okay, what my memory says. Okay, so Kyle, good idea. Butch off.
Thank you, Butch. Any other comments? All in favor of accepting the audit report?
Hang on a second. I just have one more.
Sure.
I'm not, this is Angie DeSanto. I'm not sure if this is the time to say it, but I'm not sure what the business office personnel are paid, but maybe it's not enough. And, to keep really, really good people like we have. And I don't know whose, responsibility that is, but I do know in Wellington, they had to get a former math teacher to be their business manager. I think these positions are hard to fill. And if we don't have, consistency next year, this coming fiscal year with, the business office at the school, that's going to be really tricky. And we need to get really good people, probably more than one in there. And I don't know if that affects the budget or anything, but that's my opinion anyway.
Thank you, Angie.
Okay.
Just to sort of, we may have more discussion about that at our next meeting. I want to stay within, we're in a special meeting. We really have to stay within the agenda.
Okay.
The next meeting that we have on the 16th, we're going to talk specifically about budgets and so forth.
Okay.
And I think that that's a relevant comment for budget. So, a recommendation of offering more resources for the finance department does go to a budget concern. So it's something I think we would bring up at our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. So we still have on the a motion to accept the audit report. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. The next thing is action to accept the modified budget calendar. I sent it out to everybody. I assume everybody's had a chance to look at it, and I assume, and this is an assumption, that nobody cares about the budget calendar except myself and Cheryl. But if anybody cares about the budget calendar, maybe they could give me a chat and let me know. And do we all understand the budget calendar? The reason, we have to do that is at some point, we have to either hold a referendum or this board has to act on the town's behalf. What we have decided, or what I thought was the right thing to do, is to push this like we've done, one other year basically to the 11th hour. So going to June 3rd. Is basically the last couple of days that we can pass the budget and set the mill rate that would then allow our tax collector to be able to provide billing with her requirements and gives her adequate time.
I have a question.
Sure.
Angie DeSanto. Does that mean that a referendum would be our citizens would show up at Knowlton Hall and vote the way we always vote?
Yeah, so a referendum means exactly that, Angie, that there is some form of a vote. I have spoken to a number of people about this particular topic. And it seems to me that the prudent thing for this board to do is to wait as long as possible to see if we can actually hold a vote safely for all of our citizens to be able to participate.
What are the other districts, towns doing?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer to, but what I can tell you is that at their last Board of Selectmen meeting, the selectmen did pass the ability for the Board of Finance to act on the town's behalf in terms of a referendum. So as an example, this was something sent down by the governor's office. As many of you probably know, and it was on the front page of the Chronicle today, the Region 19 was also, their Board of Ed was given the power to pass that referendum to pass that budget without a referendum. They are acting on our behalves, which they did at their last meeting. So right now, if we were to have a referendum, Region 19 would not be part of it because that's already a passed budget that we already have to deal with financially.
I don't think it's going to be safe to have citizens come out by June, whatever it is, 3rd or whatever. It's too early.
That may very well be the case, Angie. And I personally agree with you, but I don't know that for a fact yet. So I think it's prudent for us as a board to act as though we are going to have a referendum. And when it becomes evident that we can't, then we act on the people's behalf.
That sounds like a
my
plan.
feeling.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Anybody else have questions about the budget calendar?
Hi, Chuck. This is Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
Jesse Burnham. I just wanted to say I agree with you and the proposed budget calendar. It gives us the best opportunity to allow the public to have a voice in this matter. But then, of course, if it's deemed unsafe, then we would have to act on the town's behalf.
Thank you. Anybody else having a thought on that, or agree, or does somebody want to make a motion to accept the revised budget calendar?
Carl Falsgraf, so move.
I'll second it, Butch Simpson.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you. Motion passes. I have in the agenda a second opportunity for public to speak. Does anybody, with the overwhelming amount of public that we have here?
Come on, you know I'm going to say something, right?
That would be great.
No, actually, Paul Varga, Chuck, I appreciate it, Chuck. I wanted to add that the one reason I'm sitting in on this is because I think it's important that the townspeople, although they don't seem to care enough to attend the meeting virtually, it's important that we have a say, if possible, and be allowed to vote. And I think that nobody right now can even guess when we may or may not be set free, so to speak. But as long as it's possible financially and fiscally to let the townspeople have a vote, I think that's really important. That's part of the process we do here in this country, and if we skip it, it doesn't bode well for the future, in my opinion. So thank you, Chuck, and the board for trying to make that happen. I appreciate it. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else have a public comment?
Butch Simpson from Board of Finance. I have to agree with the gentleman that was just talking. I think that if at all possible, the people that in the town of Ashford should vote on whether we accept or reject the budget, because if the Board of Finance does it, it could be settled by one vote.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Butch.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the next agenda item, Jesse's still with us. Annual town report update. Jesse, I know I'm catching you off guard here probably. Do you have anything to add? And it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, at this point in time, I don't. This is Jesse speaking, by the way. I don't have anything additional to add other than I'm working on tying up the loose ends from the building department's section of the report, and I'm hoping to get some information on the dedication of it. So I hope to be in contact with Cheryl to finalize that in the next week or so.
Very good. Thank you.
May I, Chuck?
Cheryl,
Jesse, this is Cheryl. Michael Gardner has been in because he's been in for the emergency, and he has agreed to do the land use annual report.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Cheryl. Agenda items for the next meeting. Basically, the next meeting, which again is a special meeting, it's going to be this Thursday. I apologize for one right after another, but it unfortunately is driven by the revised budget calendar that you guys just passed. So thanks. So we will be meeting again on Thursday, and basically what we'll be doing is discussing the budget that we want to put forward for the public hearing. So
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, Angie DeSanto, you'll send out a new link because you said every meeting has a different one. So you'll send an agenda, and within the agenda will be the link to get here.
Yes. In fact, what we decided to do is hold off on that agenda until we actually had the budget calendar passed. And, just in case somebody had an objection and we needed to do something different. So tomorrow morning, there will be an agenda and we will post, you guys will all get it from me. But what I will do, or what I have been doing, is I send them off to Cheryl, who then does her magic and puts all the magic stuff at the bottom of my agenda so that we all can attend.
Love the magic.
So basically, it'll be a very limited agenda for next meeting. We'll, go from there. So I'll do minutes. We'll talk about the budget, what we're putting forward for the public hearing.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Not about the meet. Well, it's sort of about the meeting. Have you reached out to the people who haven't made it for the last two, the practice and tonight, to see what's going on? Are they okay?
I will, Angie, just to see what's going on with them, and hopefully they can participate.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Remarks for the good of the board.
Hey, Chuck, it's Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
It's Paul. Can I just point something out? I'm looking at the town website, and the revised budget calendar shows that special meeting as April 18th. It says Thursday, but it says April 18th, not the 16th.
We'll make an adjustment, but it should be the 16th.
Yeah, I was looking at it going, that doesn't add up. All right, thanks.
Yeah, good. Good catch, Paul. On my hunk of paper, it says the 16th. Very good. We'll make that correction, and you guys all get an agenda tomorrow. Remarks for the good of the board. I wanted to thank all of you for your willingness to deal with this type of virtual meeting. I don't think this is simple. I think it's uncomfortable for some people. But I really appreciate all of your efforts to do the best we can to make all of this work. And I'm actually very impressed with all of you. So thank you all very much.
Butch Simpson,
You're welcome.
Chuck, I'd like to thank you for all the added effort that you had to put into this. You know, you've been to my house twice to deliver paperwork, and it wouldn't be done. It wouldn't be a legal meeting if you hadn't done that. Okay, so I want to thank you for all the effort you're putting into this, because it can't be easy on your side.
Mm.
Thanks, Butch.
You're welcome.
Hey, Carl, we need your motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second, Angie DeSanto.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, all. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We'll see you on Thursday.
Bye.
Have a good night.